pile in. It's the Jimmy Boy Hour with me, your host, Omarcomin. We're back once again with that 8-man Can't Wait to Be King, Who Ate My Wing 8-man tournament event extravaganza. Like I mentioned last time, I'm playing with 7 Vikings from all over Europe. And we're here in round 2. This round I end up against Infernal Dwarfs, which I think is pretty ideal for me. You've seen the lists. I will break down deployment, but before we do that, I just thought I'd mention how our first round closed out. I think we finished with 88 points. I think about 12 shy of capping. I think the cap is 100. And that put us in something like 8th or 9th place. And we ended up paired against a team from Germany. I'm told that this German team includes a couple of the best players in the world, so guys like Scrub. I am playing Athos 76, who I do not know, and I am not sure if he is among their ETC roster, but nevertheless he was a polite, gregarious opponent and was kind enough to stay up really late to play this one, so hats off to him for that. So this is deployment. Again, you'll have seen the lists off the top, but I will break things down starting with the Dwarven Holds. You see the miners off the board ambushing. You've got 2 Grudge Busters behind the house, a pair of warriors with paired weapons. My King Throne, BSB Shield Bearer, and Runic Smith Death Star, dead center in the map. You've got a unit of 10 paired weapon warriors back in the deployment zone, another 10-man unit of paired weapon warriors vanguarding, 16 rangers in the ruins that scouted, another 16 rangers on the hill in the southwest that also scouted, and then I forgot to mention the cannon. On the Infernal Dwarves side, you've got 6 Khadim Incarnates, sorry. You have the Vassal Slingshot, 23 or 24 warriors that are the Ziggurat regulars, Titan Mortar, 15 Citadel Guard, a Titan Mortar, Vassal Slingshot, looks like 5 Taruk Anointed with the Taruk Commissioner BSB, 5 Vassal Cav, and then 23 warriors with his General Master Wizard there. So we're playing King of the Hill, or Capture the King of the Hill. So he won the side roll. I opted to deploy everything and go first. He declared for the ruins as his objective, and I followed suit by claiming it for myself as well, forcing him to have to fight me more or less in a phone booth, which is pretty well the happy place for my list. So he has to come to me, he has to face me, and I can leave my Death Star as close to that objective as I want. So after deployment, this is how we end up. He scouts or vanguards his Vassal Cav behind the wall. He has a pretty long charge of 9. It would be a 9 because they're move 8 on the Rangers. But they're swift strides, so that's pretty scary. And currently they're chaffing his Taruk Anointed. So if I can hold them there, that means that his scariest unit is really not going to factor for turn 1 charges. So that's going to be my objective, to basically be aggressive here, hold those Taruk Anointed in place, and let's see how we end up at the end of turn 1 Dwarven Holds. Oh, I'll cover spells while we're at it. I'm going to take shit for this one again from Young Hermenard. So I chose to take Revocation. I chose spell second, but I'll tell you why I did this. So I chose the Revocation, -1 to wound on the BSB. So he's got the Banner of Wisdom, which allows him to cast in his own unit. And then the Runesmith has Revocation, -1 to wound, and -1 to hit as his spells. On the opposing side, he has his Hereditary, which does some kind of fuckery with your offensive and defensive skill based on the number of incendiary tokens you have. He's got the Silver Spike, he's got Corruption of Tin, and he's he's got the +1 armor augment on his Alchemy Master. And then his occultism guy has Hands of Gold or Hand of Gold, and I think the Breath Weapon. So two reasonably powerful spells for an Adept. I think that's one of the better Adept lineups, if you ask me. That's like two really powerful spells that you can pull out with that. So I chose Revocation, probably incorrectly, with the intention of eating. I thought he would take Lash to kill my Grudge Busters. So my intention was to eat the Quicksilver Lash with my Rune of Devouring to basically win the ranged game. I mean, he still has a fair amount of shooting, but if I can avoid getting magicked off the table, then I just have to worry about his shooting, and I felt like I had pretty reasonable tools to deal with some of his shooting with my ambushing miner. So that was the intention. In hindsight, with the power of hindsight, I think having either Rune of Oath or Rune of Reckoning and going forward is probably the way to go. It just makes your 3 spells from your Runic Smith so threatening that I think it really is worth. You're always rerolling Wound is almost always a threat, whereas Revocation is so situational. Like, you can cast it as like a preemptive debuff when you know a combat is coming, but yeah, I just think it's situational. It's too situational, and I maybe need to rethink that strategy. Anyway, let's move on to Dwarven Hold's turn 1. So here we are, end of Dwarven Hold's turn 1. You'll see I move up fairly aggressively with the Death Star, keeping front charges on the Kaidoms, the Ziggurat Regulars in the, I guess, center of the map. And then you see the Chaff move in the east with the vanguarding unit of warriors. Now, I make a bit of a mistake here. I fiddled with movement probably a bit too much, and I started to get self-conscious at how long it was taking, and eventually I just kind of gave up and said, yeah, that'll work, good enough. And what I ended up doing was probably the least optimal way of chaffing those wolves. So the intention originally was to give the Ziggurat Regulars in the center of the map a flank charge on those warriors with no potential overrun, and also give a flank charge to the Ziggurat Warriors in the far east of the map. So they'd have double flanks, and the result of that would be that there would be no potential overruns into my Death Star, and it would cause quite a bit of congestion in that eastern part of the map, hopefully tying up those anointed. Now, he could also charge with his Cav, but they potentially bleed combat res for him, fighting those warriors face to face. And even if he did charge them into those warriors, the anointed can't really wheel past in either direction to do anything of consequence. So he's kind of stuck, at least for 2 turns. So I think this is a bit of a poor play on his part to have moved those scouts to that position behind that wall. I think he was protecting them from shooting, trying to protect his chaff, but I don't think he fully thought it through. In Magic, I end up getting -1 to wound and -1 to hit in on the big Death Star. And in shooting, I have a very disappointing round. I do 1 wound onto the Kaidoms in the forest, and I think I do 1 wound onto the Ziggurat Regulars in the east. And that's pretty much it for my turn 1. Just like in terms of metagame, like if you had a quick look at his characters, there is pretty much nothing in his list that can step to my bunker, either one-on-one or even in a combo charge. The only way he can really break my bunker is with several flank charges. With the Holdstone, though, I'm still mostly going to be steadfast, and so long as that king is in there dishing out d3 wounds against either Kaidims or Taruks, there's a good chance I will win most combats. So the intention here was basically to run this straight, be as aggressive as possible, take as much as I could, as quickly as I could, and force him to fight me, really. Either push him off the objective or force him to come onto the objective. Now I get into a little bit of trouble, and we'll take a quick look at that in the Infernal Dwarves turn 1. Okay, so end of Infernal Dwarves turn 1. He combo charges with his 2 Ziggurat regular units onto the unit of warriors that was chaffing the vassal cavalry. And he starts to shuffle around his Taruk Anointed so that they can do something in a subsequent turn. I will note that I forgot to apply my grudges. This is one of my common mistakes as a player. And so, to be fair, I applied, I mean, there's obvious targets for this, so the grudges went on the Kaidims, on the Taruks, and then I let my opponent choose the final grudged unit. I mean, you would usually grudge probably the general's unit, but because they were already in combat, it was a little bit too cheesy in my opinion for me to declare that, so I allowed my opponent to make the choice, and he decides to put it on the vassal slingshot in the forest. So there you go. In magic phase, I think he only gets in a breath weapon. Everything else fails. So he's got the breath weapon. In shooting, I don't think he does a thing. Doesn't look like it. And then he uses his breath weapon, and I think he kills one warrior with the breath weapon, so well done there. Obviously in combat, the 2 Ziggurats fighting in extra ranks at strength 5 nuke that unit of warriors to a man. I think they did 14 wounds, which was pretty impressive, and he chooses not to overrun. I don't know if he would have had... No, he wouldn't have had an overrun, in fact. So kind of a perfect outcome. I am left sort of in this position, and we'll move to Dwarven Hold's turn 2. So in my turn, I charge one of my 10-man units of warriors into his vassal cavalry. I do a reform with my general's unit to face the 2 flanking units of Ziggurat regulars. I move my unit of warriors in the east up to prevent a combo charge with both units of warriors onto the bunker. Or I guess the bus. I never know what to call it. Bunker, bus, Death Star, whatever. And then just start moving my my Grudge Busters up fairly aggressively. Now you'll note the 2 units of warriors that are stacked. The intention there is for the Kaidims, if they are going to try to charge, to not have an overrun into the King Bunker flank. So if they do charge those warriors, which they should, they'll kill them or cause them to flee, and as a result, they will have only an overrun into the next unit of warriors, which leaves basically a free charge for the Grudge Buster and a whole bunch of other options for the big Death Star, amongst other things. You will also note the miners arrived. Now this is maybe a misplay. I was discussing this with one of my teammates afterwards. I don't think I had any really great positions for the miners to go in this game. I think mainly they needed to apply pressure, so they showed up there. But in hindsight, I almost think being inside of 3 with the Citadel Guard may have been better, and it's entirely possible to have done with the amount of movement I had. So they, just so you know, on the charge are paired weapons. So they have, I think there's 12, yeah. So there's 18 strength 5 attacks at initiative 3. So it would put quite a big dent in that unit of Citadel Guard. So in hindsight, probably better to have put them to the south of that Vassal Slingshot and in the rear of those Citadel Guards. So they wouldn't even have had necessarily a stand and shoot reaction. So yeah, I think I would have won that handily. And then I would have likely an overrun on either one of those Titan mortars. In any case, yeah, so in Magic, I only get -1 to wound in on my bunker, on the bus, and in combat, the warriors kill the vassal cavalry outright, and I restrain to keep my sort of Death Star protection in place. In shooting, I do next to nothing. I think my ranger unit maybe killed 2 guys, 3 guys this turn. Three ziggurat warriors. And it's crazy. Like, they have a 5+ armor. I think I was just rolling really shit with those rangers because they're actually on short range there, so they should have put a huge dent in that unit. Oh, they did. Well, they killed like 4, maybe 5. That's not bad. Yeah, so that's it for Dwarven Hold's turn 2. There was some consternation around the reform that I did in the center, and maybe we can put some of that to rest. Following his charge, his unit of Ziggurat Warriors, the closest unit to that bunker, was within 1 inch of my unit. And as far as I know, the rule is if something is within 1 inch, you can remain within 1 inch. So that was how I reformed. I reformed remaining within 1 inch of that unit, and then backed up. So it's my understanding that that's legal. I believe I could have reformed another way, but if the rule is in fact, as my opponent and some other chucklehead in the chat were trying to claim, that once you're within 1 inch you can't do anything, that's pretty ridiculous and prone to massive abuse. So I don't know that that is actually the case. I'm 99% sure we played it correctly. And this is one of the joys of team tournaments, is that you get not just one incorrect opinion, you get multiple. So if I'm wrong, please tell me in the chat. I don't think it affects the outcome of the game. We could have resolved. I could have figured out another way to do it. In any case, let me know in the comments. Infernal Dwarves turn 2. Something terrible has happened. You will notice that there are 2 units of warriors missing in the west. What happened was the Kaidims charged and tore through the first unit of warriors, no problem. And then the trailing unit of warriors that were supposed to take the overrun failed a leadership 10 rerollable, and fled. So you'll see they are now sitting in behind that Grudge Buster. Not great. Not great at all. In the west, you'll see that he has removed his Prophet of Lugar to create, I guess this is a preemptive chaff before the overrun occurred. But that Prophet of Lugar is standing in front of my very terrifying Death Star to prevent, I guess, them from basically breaking out and going wild. On the charge against the 10-man unit of warriors in the north, I think he had 1 combat by something like, I think I was down by 3 or 4 there. I think it was 4, and I was on a 6 rerollable, and I made it. So those 3 warriors managed to stick. I'm not sure if he got much of anything in Magic. Yeah, this is the turn he cast Corruption of Tin on my bunker, and he got, I think, a 14. He got a 16 on dice, but I have MR2, so I needed a 14 on I think 4 dice I had to dispel it. So it was like a 56% chance. I rolled the dice, and I managed to save my unit's armor, which turns out to be pretty big in the grand scheme of things. So that was kind of a cool little moment. In shooting, though, he manages to kill 6 miners, which is not great. That unit is pretty depleted. However, I think even with 6, 12 strength 5 attacks on the charge, they should still do enough damage to that Citadel Guard unit to potentially win combat, and have a very short overrun charge after killing this Titan mortar that's in front of them. So I'm feeling pretty good, even though they're somewhat depleted. That they'll make up quite a few of their points. Yeah, so that's sort of, we already did the results of those 2 combats, so I'm feeling pretty good about my position here. I've got some nice Grudgebuster charges lined up. I have some flanks if I need them, and my bunker is still pretty well protected. I did use, I guess I didn't in this turn, but I will use my Hold Stone in this coming turn. So let's move to Dwarven Hold's turn 3. So here we have the end of Dwarven Hold's turn 3, and things are starting to happen for me. In the west, I move my Rangers up. They no longer have a target for shooting, so they are now a combat element. The Warriors do rally, and unfortunately, this is another one of the things I do frequently as a player. When I rally units, I don't always reform them in an appropriate way. So that 10-man unit of warriors by the house there, by the impassable terrain in the center of the map, there's pretty much nothing that they can do looking to the south. What I should have done when they rallied is immediately look at the objective. They are basically a contingency for that objective, and there are far more options for them in that northern part of the map to contribute. So a bit of a misplay there. Something to keep in mind, I guess, when you like, rallying units is kind of a gift. You know, you've saved the unit. It's maybe passed through your own units, and you can more or less freely reposition them, especially with infantry. I mean, it's one of those things I really do need to get better at. Is like thinking more about where that unit can go or should go once they've done their flee move. In the center of the map, the Grudgebuster charged the flanks of those Kaidims. The other Grudgebuster charged those Ziggurat regulars that were fighting the unit of warriors. The miners charged the Titan mortar they were facing, and you'll notice they are not in combat with the Citadel regulars. They rolled a whopping double 1 for their overrun. I think they needed a 5, and they rolled 1-1. So they're standing there in no man's land and are just going to get shot to ribbons. In my own magic phase, all I got through was a revocation spell. Again, this will probably continue to haunt me as my teammate reminds me how terrible that spell is. But if I did have rerolls to wound here, there is a lot more compelling places to roll it. Those reroll to wounds are also good on the Grudge Busters, which is something I haven't really thought a lot about. You can reroll the grinds, which is a pretty big deal because they don't benefit from hatred. So, in combat, we kill a shitload of Kaidims. I did, as I mentioned, use my Hold Stone. So I'm going to be steadfast there regardless, but between the grinds and the spears, we managed to kill all but one Kaidim, the Kaidim champ. And I reformed to put my king in base to base. Again, probably a minor misplay here. I maybe over reformed, like I backed my unit up a bit too much. Because I actually end up giving that unit of Ziggurat warriors that I cast the revocation spell on an option here that I would have preferred not to have given them. But that's okay. It would have been better, I think, not to have pulled the king all the way back into combat. It would have been better for them to stay more in the face of that unit of warriors, because I just don't need it. I was thinking I'd use the D3 wounds against the Kaidims, but the grinds alone were probably enough to kill that soul Kaidem, and then with the, I don't know what I'd have, 12 spears, that would have been plenty. So again, a minor misplay. These things add up, though, I guess, so it's good to take note of them and think about them as you identify them. In shooting, I think I'm finally starting to do some stuff in shooting. So the 16 Rangers in the top are starting to chip off some wounds from the Taruk Anointed, which is a big deal. If I can get that unit so that it doesn't break steadfast, then my Ranger unit is basically has it made in the shade in that ruins, right? Because they'll have a stand and shoot, they'll have a round of shooting, and the Taruks will have to take DTs at this point to dislodge them. So that's a pretty nice position to be in. And then of course they're still taking cannon shots every turn they're not in combat. What am I missing here? I think that's it. That's turn 3, Dwarven Holtz. This video, by the way, brought to you by Bud Light. And we are now, I think, in turn 3. Yeah, turn 3 Infernal Dwarves. So you'll see what happened here. So the option that I left him by moving my by over reforming my King's unit is that his unit of Ziggurat warriors that was in front of the bus was able to charge the flank of my Grudgebuster in the north, which is not great. They were that I kind of let them escape there, so not a great move on my part. Nevertheless, to do that, his Prophet of Lugar had to charge into combat with my unit, and something a little bit stupid happens here. So on the unit profile in UB for that model, it says it had a potion of strength. So I was thinking the best route was to break him on combat. So even if he overkilled my champion in a challenge, with the 3 wounds to the Kaidem Incarnate, and then my static res of 5 in that unit, I would still make him like a -4 or a -5 on his break test, which is a pretty comfortable place to be. Unfortunately, I didn't cross-check the model entry on UB versus the actual list my opponent submitted for the tournament, and that guy actually was made of paper. I could have killed him very, very easily with either my Thane or with my King, with next to 0 danger. And that kind of costs me because I end up killing the Kaidem, but I don't fall out of combat because I didn't manage to kill the Lugar. He kills my champion in return, and so I stick here in this position, but my Grudgebuster is now free, and my Northern Grudgebuster thankfully it does 7 wounds onto the unit of Ziggurat warriors that was in its front facing, and I think it survives with 1 wound that combat. And that's with, I think, rerolls to wound. So got a little bit lucky there. Got very lucky there, to be honest. Although they hit on 4 and they wound on 4, so I think doing 3 wounds there is about average for him. Might be slightly worse than average with his flaming rerolls, but c'est la vie. He does charge my miners, and I think he only kills 1 with his Citadel Guard. I kill 3 in return, and I think I'm on a leadership 8, and I managed to stick for a turn, so that's pretty sweet. Better than I expected. And that's kind of it. So he reforms to face me in the south with his Ziggurat Guard. I reform my Grudge Buster to send him into action against those Ziggurat Guard and basically execute a pinning charge. He'll corner clip. Let's just move on. I'll show you on the next slide. One thing I forgot to mention is in my opponent's magic there, he got Word of Iron off on his Taruks, so they've got like a 1+ armor now. But I devoured it, so he no longer has that spell to cast in this game. So he's now on 5 spells total, which is a pretty comfortable place to be. And that +1 armor spell can be really, really troublesome, especially in a grind, because I lose the benefit of my devastating charge in the grind, and I also lose hatred. So having additional armor is not a great thing. Yeah, so following the combat with the Ziggurat regulars, he reforms to, I think, to avoid a subsequent charge from my King's unit. And his Taruks really have nowhere to go at the moment, so they just, I think, back up a little bit to threaten a charge on my bunker. His Citadel Guard end up winning combat against me. Is this my turn? Or is this his turn? Yeah, this is my turn. So I charged with the... Yeah, I charged with the Grudge Buster, and the 2 Grudge Busters managed to do a buttload of wounds onto those Ziggurat regulars. He does kill the northern one, but no harm is really done there because the southern one sticks, again on 1 wound, because I think it was only... He only had 2 attacks on it, 2 attacks hitting on 4s and wounding on 4s, and he didn't make either of them, so that was again a bit of a lucky break. Continue to move those Rangers into combat. You'll see here I rectify my mistake with my warriors and I turn them to face the objective, so they've lost a turn now. They would be they actually might have been threatening, yeah, they might have been threatening a flank charge in this turn. Yeah, so that is unfortunate, but that's where we are. The cannon, I think, does some wounds onto the Taruks, and my Rangers maybe do, I think I do 1 or 2 wounds here because of his armor, so nothing huge happening. Let's move on. So we are the end of Infernal Dwarves turn 4 here. Is that right? Yeah, turn 4. So he ends up winning the combat with the Grudge Buster, but he only had, I think, 6 models remaining. So he reforms them in a conga facing my bus. And I think I have to apologize because we're missing a slide here. This is showing sort of outcomes after that. This is Dwarven Holds, I think, turn 5 or turn 4. This is turn 5, end of Dwarven Holds, turn 5. But in turn 4, his turn 4, he moves his Taruk Anointed to within 7 inches of my Rangers, so they won't have a stand and shoot, but they'll still have a turn of shooting and a cannon. So in my turn of shooting, I end up killing enough to make it so he is no longer has a rank. So there's no risk of him breaking my Steadfast, and he will still have to charge and take DTs, although I won't get a stand and shoot. Like I mentioned, he wins the combat as relative. He kills the Grudge Buster doing 1 wound, but before he's able to do that, I do, I think, another 6 or 7 wounds with the Grudge Buster onto him, and he reforms in a conga facing my bus. But he did not, or maybe he did. I told him that my king could charge the flank of his conga line. And potentially not overrun into the BSB, but be positioned for a turn 6 charge into the flank of his BSB. My king charges, completely fluffs his wound rolls, and I think does 1 wound on 5 attacks, strength 7. So that was unfortunate, but the Throne Bearers with Hatred managed to kill, I think, another 3. So I end up winning combat. He sticks on something ridiculous like a 1-3. And I turn just in case he decides to charge me with his Citadel Guard in the south. My Rangers, who killed the vassal slingshot with the help of hatred, overrun, but they don't quite make it into the Titan mortar, so that is unfortunate. And this is how we're left. So we go into Infernal Dwarves turn 6 or turn 5, and then I'll wrap up the game from there. So this is a combined slide here. His Taruks. Man, I fucking hate that. How do you say that? Taruk. It's dumb, stupid. There's too many stupid names. Big Bulls. His Big Bulls charge my Rangers, and he takes 2 DTs, killing the remaining Anointed. So it's just his BSB into combat with the Rangers. There are 16 of them, and just the 1 BSB. So even with Battle Focus, he can't possibly do enough to break their Steadfast. And with the King in 18 and the BSB in 12, they are at very little risk of running off the table. The King manages to finish off the remaining 4 warriors, and in my turn I had, I think, an 11-inch charge, so on a 9 to get into that's an 8 to get into his BSB, and I made it, which is a big deal because BSB is worth big points, obviously. My 2 scoring units, unnecessarily perhaps, move forward to capture the objective or secure the objective. The Rangers in the south charge the Titan mortar and completely fluff their attacks. I think I managed 1 wound that he saved. Infernal Dwarf War Machines are res 4 with plate armor, which is not too shabby, so they left themselves open to a flank charge from the Citadel Guard, which he makes. Obviously it was an auto, and I lose combat and break, so he gets another 343 points from that. Probably a stupid play. I could have just shot at him and potentially caused him to panic with very little risk to myself. He could have charged me, and again, I would have had to stand and shoot. So probably a stupid play there. But with the charge into the BSB, I don't actually kill the BSB. We actually push combat, but I win on static because I had a charge, a rear, a rank. And yeah, so he lost his rerollable. I think he had a rerollable 6, and he failed and fled off the table. And that's pretty much where we end up. I mean, this list, so my list, it may seem like I lost a fair amount, and I guess I did. There are points I certainly could have saved or salvaged here that I didn't need to give up. However, unless you can take the Death Star, you really can't take that many points off my list. So I think I ended up only giving up about 1,600 points to my opponent, and I took about 3,400. So we had a spread of over 1,800 points, and I won the objective for a 18-2. Combined with my 12-8 from last round, I am up to 30 points so far in this tournament, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. My goal is to, I'm on sort of this redemption path following my last tournament performance, so I'm really hoping to finish as the top Dwarven Holds General in this tournament. There are quite a few very, very, very skilled Dwarven Holds players in the tournament already, so I've got my work cut out for me, but I'm on track so far, and hopefully we can string a few more together. As for my team right now, we're not sitting in such a great position. This has been a very strange pairing, actually. We have 4 major victories, like between 20 and 17 points, and they have 4 major victories between 20 and 17 points. So we're virtually tied at this point, with 2 games left to play, and unfortunately that means neither team will cap, but I guess when you're playing against a very skilled and talented team like Germany, that's about the best you can hope for. It's just strange to me that they're not, it would be more interesting if there was 8 draws or near draws, but these blowouts, they make for a very strange, I guess, final calculation. Just in case you're interested in my opponent's turn 6, like all that happened was the combat. He tried to cast a silver spike and maybe kill something, but failed, and that's it. That's the game. So another good one. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's nothing left to say except stay Jimmy, boys.